Hi, guys. It's Julie Bruns, and you're listening to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. Thanks for joining today. My next guest is a guy named John. He's a really cool entrepreneur, and he's going to tell us about his journey and how he became so successful. I am talking today to a very interesting person, and his name is John, and he's a person I read a story about in a book recently over the summer, and I was very intrigued at his story and his career journey, and I thought it'd be awesome to talk to him and find out a little bit more about how he came to be where he is in his life. So welcome, John. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Julie. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. So I know that I know a little bit about your story, and our audience doesn't. So I wanted just to start out with what did you think, if you go back to when you were in high school or in college, what did you initially want to do when you grew up, or what did you want to study?
Well, I think that we get, is a condition that we get set in, either with our parents or there's someone that's an influencer, and we get this idea that college is the route. And for me, college was one of the conversations I would have with my parents, but my dad is I come from a military background, so the military was really the first option that my dad put in front of me. And when you have someone in the military that has been successful, like my father, they tend to maybe want to introduce you to officer candidate school. And that was put in front of me many, many times. But I was very athletic, and my father was not. And so I also was in a rebellious mode, and I thought that athletics was going to be maybe a part of my life throughout my early years. But also on my mother's side, we had a relative that had an architectural drafting firm in where I grew up, and so I was very gifted in my early life. I had a passion for drawing, and so architectural drafting was something that was on the table. I took quite a few classes in high school, and in my first year of college, I did some drafting, and I thought for sure I was going to get into the architectural drafting field. But at some point, I just felt at that time school wasn't for me. I sat in on a little bit of an internship at that firm, and I really realized it wasn't for me. And as I was working in the summers, I found myself gravitating to maybe older friendships by 1 or 2 years, and that made me have a sense of seeing people and what they were doing. Even though they might have been in college, they also had jobs, and they were starting maybe in their early careers. And I found myself gravitating to some of the nightlife where I grew up. And I had a close friend that was, let's say, I want to use a professional term, doorman. And I was very intrigued at an early age of 18 of this job and managing the door and letting people in. And so I told a friend of mine, let's become doormen and let's do this. And through that, I became a bartender. They had a bartending school there, and I attended that. So I became a bartender at a very early age. And what happened was the I guess passion of an idea of making money over education really came to the forefront. And that was something that really just kind of took over for me, and seeing how you could make money versus going to school. And whereas I had already my friends going to school, it still weighed on me heavily that I liked what I was doing. I was bartending at a number one club in the town that I grew up in, and it was almost like a celebrity job in a sense, and I liked it. So really, that's kind of in a nutshell.
You got the bug. It's funny, you didn't know this about me, but I was actually a bartender and a waitress for several years all through college, undergrad and graduate school. So I know what you're talking about. Making that money almost gets addictive, and being in that life is it's easy to get used to quickly.
Very much so, and I enjoyed it, and it was crazy. I was making a good amount of money weekly. Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. So how did you get from that world to your next job in corporate America for the next 15, 20 years, couple of decades, I think it was? How did you propel
So
from there? Next up.
sure, so absolutely. I bounced around a little bit. I felt myself always meeting different people, especially in that particular job, and I bounced into a job which I'll be very brief on. A friend of mine had a company where they sold monitoring network security systems, and I got into that a little bit. And still bartending, in the evenings. But in the end, I do still all my high school friends. They were still working a lot of these tip type jobs. And as I transitioned out of the bartending, I found myself gravitating into the hospitality industry through also, again, a network of friends that were doing it at the same time. And so through that, I would, real interesting enough, I would see a lot of these people come in and out of the hotel where I worked. And I saw a gentleman who I would see once a week that would come in there with a tie on and a suit. And I would ask myself, wow, I'd like to this is true. This is really what would go through my head. I would like to wear a suit one day, and I would like to, I would like to call on somebody wearing a suit and a tie. I want to know what that guy does. And so every time I'd see him, eventually I made my way over to him, and I found that he worked for a very large alcohol beverage company. And so I'll put that on the show just for a moment. And so through the years there that I worked there, we hosted a major golf tournament on the tour, which was at the time called the Nestle Invitational. And through my years being there, I got assigned to a gentleman who was the CEO of a very large company, which was Nestle. And so the next 3 years I would be assigned to him. And on my very last time being assigned to him, when he was there and I was taking him and his wife back to the airport on a Sunday in the afternoon, he turned to me and said, John, I like that you're assigned to me and you're with me for a full week. That's been great. You're a great individual. I like it, but you have more to offer, and I'm not sure what you're doing with yourself. But if you're here next year and you pick me up, I'm not going to let you attend me because you have such a gift, and I feel like you need to be in sales and you need to be moving along with your life. And at the time, I'm 23 years old, 23, let's say. And I said, yeah, I know. I've got an idea. I think I want to get into the alcohol beverage industry. And because I've had a little bit of contact with wine, and when I bartended, I did a little bit of day bartending in a fine restaurant in the complex that I worked. He says, I'm going to send you somebody to meet, and I want you to take the lead and run with it. And when you meet the person, be specific on what you do. They're going to have an opportunity for you. And I said, okay. So this a month passes by, and a lady shows up who I knew because of the activity of this event. And by the way, the Nestle Invitational, they also had ties at the same time to Behringer Winery. And so I met this lady. She introduced me to a gentleman over at one of the largest distributors in the country out in this city that I worked in. And so I met this gentleman, long story short. He said he had an opportunity. He was told that he had to interview me. And this is how the conversation went. Hi, how are you? I was told I had to interview you. You know somebody. I don't have anything at the moment. I'll call you in a couple weeks. I have your information. I said, well, if you could, I also have another opportunity where someone's approached me to open up a bar up in Pensacola. And so if you could call me as soon as possible, let me know, that'd be great, because I've got to make a decision within, I'd say about a 7-day window I have. And so a couple weeks go by, I don't hear from the gentleman, and nor do I call him back. And so I make my move, and I pack up my stuff. I move to Pensacola. And this is way before cell phones and stuff, and even I think even before pagers. So I get a call from my mom one evening and says, this gentleman's trying to reach you at this company. Can you give him a call? And I called the gentleman and I said, hey, I mentioned that I had to have an answer, and he says, well, I have a job for you. I said, well, I've already relocated, and I'm sorry. Thank you very much, but thank you. And so I spent the next years in Pensacola and running this 5-venue bar, and it was a great experience. We brought in national acts like Eddie Money, Chicago, REO Speedwagon. And it was a great job. I was running the place. I was a general manager at age 24, and I must have had about 30 employees, and I was doing it. And so. But the problem was that this place was on the beach, and it was the same routine day in and day out, and it became something that I knew that wasn't long term. And so I think the summer of the fall of 1996, I believe. I think I was 25 or 26. I drove home and spent the holidays with my family, and I also went and I knocked on the door of this company that had offered me a job a couple years back. And since a lady came down who had remembered me, and she says, "I remember you, the gentleman that's not in this position anymore, but somebody else remembers you and would like to speak to you. Can you come back on Monday?" So I came back on Monday, and this gentleman basically hired me on the spot, and that was in 1996, I believe. And so I started working for this company, and which was in the alcohol beverage industry, based on the contact and the network that I had established back at this hotel.
Wow.
That I've worked for. Yeah.
It's
so, and I'm not used. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's
Julie,
crazy that 2 years went by, and I thought you were going to say, he called you and said, "Can I offer you this job?" And you were going to renege on your commitment in Pensacola. But it's cool that you said, "I'm sorry, thank you anyway," and you went and did that, and you gained some more experience those 2 years, and then came back and said, "Okay, followed up with them, and they remembered you." That's awesome.
Julie, I think, at a young age, we also get, we have these impressions upon people, and they put impressions on you. And so you make a move, you stick with it because it's what, you feel like is the most important thing at that time. And it was a cool venture for me. And I really just thought that was the place I was supposed to be, not really knowing that the opportunity in front of me would really change my life. And, so I was very lucky to come back and have this opportunity still sitting in front of me. Yeah. And so what was ironic, and Julie, I'll try to go quickly on it because it's a very long story, but the gentleman that interviewed me the very first time, and also the gentleman that gave me the opportunity, through the course of the years ended up working for me, both of them. And it's just a crazy scenario on how things played out, but I ended up working for this company for 20 years and made my mark, and I held every position that there was from the bottom of the totem pole. And you could call it from the mailroom up, because that's really what it was, to be quite honest.
Okay.
So
when you started there in '96 and were working in that bar, amid people, and went at the bottom of the rung in this company, did you have to take a pay cut? Did you know that you were taking a risk and you were giving up some money to go get this experience?
I was. I gave up a real nice package running the bar. I had my housing provided. I had a nice income package. I had benefits paid for, but it just an idea. It hit me that I'm not doing what I really had set out in my mindset a couple years back, and that was to get into the wine industry. And that's really what was in the back of my mind, is I need to see this through. And I had no idea what it meant, but I'll tell you, to your point, I started at a base salary of $17,000.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it was, and I mean, I moved back home, and I was there for, several months, but I got on my feet, and everything started taking its course. But I will tell you, it was a very tough time, because that income really was not what I was used to making. And granted, it's many years ago, but at that time, it's still equivalent to, when you look at reality, it still was not a lot of money.
Right. So you ended up being there for 20 some years, and like you said, starting at the bottom and going all the way to the top. And then, so you're there, you're learning about that industry that you wanted to be in, and you're probably meeting a lot of people and getting a lot of opportunities. So what made you say, okay, I'm done with this now? What was the transition from there to the next, to what you're doing now? Or was there something in between?
Right. So it gets interesting, because we passionately, when we're young, we really go after everything we believe in, and that's hard work, and that's paying your dues, because we all want to get promoted, and we all want to make a lot more money. And I got to tell you, in my first 4 years, I held the same position in that company. It was just a sales rep, but I was approached many different times to take a promotional move to go into a smaller market and get a promotion, get more money. And I held the line because I wanted to be promoted within the largest market that there was.
Mm-hmm.
And so after my 4-year period, I was entertained with that. It was offered to me, and I took it. And so to really fast track it, after the 20 years, I'll probably start into about the 16th year. It gets to become, when you find yourself in a position and managing many, many people and holding a very nice title, it becomes, the passion's there, but the job becomes as the word job. And you start thinking there's got to be more to this. And I've learned a lot working here. And what else can there be outside of this? Because then the job itself becomes where you're managing. It's all about how certain information, whether it be goals and how they're completed and how you're attributing towards innovation and things that are tasked and time frames. And it really becomes something that you're communicating at the highest levels of major companies that are looking for results. And you really find yourself asking, wow, this stress has become more than what I really thought it would ever be. And you look around, and sometimes your team and your colleagues has dwindled, and your teammates that you came up through the system with have moved on in certain areas, and it becomes a real political strategy. And you've got to find yourself, just like in anything, whether it be baseball, football, any type of sport, you're only as good as you once were and what you can deliver. And because you're looked at and graded upon those performance measurables. And so I really felt like at some point there was going to be a time for me to really say, you know what, you've learned a lot here. What else? What can you take? And what do you want to do? Because you know you want to do a lot more. And I felt from everything that I've learned, passion for me was really looking at something that I could do for myself, because I really thought that I could do what I was doing there, but I could do it on my own. And I wanted to give myself a chance in that opportunity.
So it sounds like you wanted a new challenge in a different realm, and you, like you said, what can you do for yourself? Because when you're in that corporate world, what you're doing is really for a team, for other people, for a big umbrella of people, and it doesn't. Yeah, it's not your own.
It's true, Julie, and really what it came down to is, you have as you get higher, the loyalty and people that are your support task, your support team, it gets thin, and it's not as gratifying once you get there, because the rewards, they may be great monetarily, but from a passion standpoint and things you accomplish, you can't share it as much as you used to, because the people beneath you are really the truth to your success. But yet, granted, you're leading the task and you're guiding, but the political realm and who you look at, it becomes a real challenge in the competitiveness, because everyone wants to take a step even above that. And so you get in a situation where there's inner office fighting at the highest level, and it's very complicated, to be quite honest. And you have pieces where it gets fragmented, and it gets peeled apart, and then you really start looking at, I'm going to make some moves here, because just your group, in how I can describe it, can be pulled apart, and people can get redeployed. And so the fun, the key word for me, and the fun and the passion really lost its energy as I got towards, the 18th, 19th, 20th year.
Okay. That makes sense. So you started feeling that. So what was the catalyst that you said, what was the catalyst when you said to yourself, I want to create something for me? It's not as gratifying as it used to be. I'm not sharing this journey with all the people I started with. What was the catalyst that got you to the next awesome thing?
Well, I feel like there was an opportunity that came my way in my last couple years, and politically speaking, I turned it down. It would have been the biggest position I would have ever held, and probably would have retired in that role. And when I turned it down, I felt like some things turned, and so I felt the momentum switch in what I mean, from me being maybe branded, and I felt like I was my own brand, and I felt like I was a person there that could have really have written their own ticket. And when I turned down this role and stayed in the role I was in because of some relationships I had that were aligned to me adjacent-wise, you know, I was with a good group of guys. I had a good, direct, immediate boss, and I stayed for those reasons alone. And then when I took a pass on a position, and then when something came my way a little bit later to move along, I felt like that was something that was taken from me. And so that point, that was the catalyst that said, you know what, now's the time, because I think this is the moment I really want to get out. And it was more, and I think what I'm leaning towards, Julie, is that there's a switch that clicks, and you know that it's time to do your own thing, and you can. It's just that leap of faith of doing it. And so
the risk.
Back in, yeah, it was time. It was just time. And so the switch was the opportunities that were there for me may have been being pulled from me. And before anything else, I think I just said, you know, let me make a move, because I know I can, and there's some other ideas I have, and there were some other positions I can take outside. And I knew for sure I wanted to create something for myself. And really, it was just something that I felt it was just time, and it was just based on some things being reassigned all the way around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So like you said, you were having a shift inward, and then when you turned down the big promotion, it sounded like almost like a door opened, and something you already described shifted, and it was like, what else? It almost sounds like, what else is possible after I don't have that? I can stay where I am. It's not lining up the way I wanted it to line up, but what else could I be doing? And then all of a sudden, so you started getting ideas, or was it you woke up one day and said, this is what I could do, or was it a long process?
Julia, it's one day I'm riding in, and I said to myself, this is what I want to do. I want to create something, and I didn't know what it would be at the moment, but I knew I was going to create a brand inside the alcohol beverage industry. And I didn't know if it was going to be wine or vodka or spirits for that matter. But I decided it would initially be a vodka, and I left this large company in 2013, and decided this was I took a little break because I wanted to recharge the batteries, and I really wanted to make sure I was really on board with the idea that I had. And so I took about four months off. And in probably in January of 2014, I created a label, a vodka label, and it was all passion. I was on fire with it. I really was excited. Started this on my own, and there's a lot of steps that you have to take, but I was prepared. I'd been prepared. 20 years preparing for this moment. And I did a lot of homework. I did a lot of research, where I would source the juice from, who I would work with, where my bottles would come from. Started working on the label, did a campaign, met with many different people from a mentoring standpoint, and I got a little bit of a business plan together, got the illustrations together, and I had something in my palm. I had it ready to go. And along with that comes a lot of financial commitment, and I learned a lot of things along the way, Julie. There's a lot of things I would do differently now, but I was on fire, and I was only going to do it the way that I knew how to do it at that moment. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was, and I was at a stage there where I was ready, and then I hit a brick wall, and the brick wall was, okay, I have it, and I've gone through X amount of cash. Now what am I going to do? And I had a lot of resources around me, but things were costing me a lot of money. And so at the same time, I also had this idea about a wine and a name as well. And I reached out for who is my partner today in this wine. And we started that project along with the vodka kind of being put on the shelf just for a little bit. And we ramped up this wine, and to this day, the wine is in the market, and we ramped that up, went down to Argentina, created that, and created a Malbec, and it's in the U.S. today as we speak, and sell in California and sell in Florida.
Unbelievable. So that doesn't even sound like it was that many years. Like you just started doing it, and it sounds like you were doing the research and doing the work, but just continuing. You kept saying fire, so it's that something was leading you a certain way, and you just weren't going to give up until you figured out what you could create.
I felt like, Julie, I needed, you know, I was on my own on the vodka project, not necessarily on my own, but literally on my own from everything that I had started. And I'm going to use the word financial a lot because, you know, for anyone that's listening, I know we've talked about a lot. I've kind of been across the board here, but you have to be prepared, knowing when you get into this situation that when you have a dream and an idea that you're funded, well funded, which I was, and I personally was well funded, but I had to pull the plug because my run rate of what I was spending wasn't going to be sustained, and because I was self-sustaining it myself, and I had to really put the brakes on because I knew I wanted to do another project with my partner in the wine category, and I knew that I would need funding there. And you know, as I get into this broadening out and doing things for yourself, I really want to touch on everything was there. The idea and the running and the passion and the concept and everything on the board, you know, but you have to be prepared to make sure that you have either a good funding capital person that's behind you, which I didn't do from the beginning. And because I was very selfish and self-minded in the sense that I can do this on my own and I don't need anybody and I don't want anybody in my project.
Right.
And so, but when it came to the wine, because I brought a partner in who is a friend and also worked with me at this company for a long period of time, we both were able to financially put our you know, money together and launch this project. And so that was a real helpful bonus with that. And so, you know, today as I speak, the vodka project's there, and to have the players ready whenever I want to pull the trigger, and I'm so more educated. And it goes back to, hey, I got a Harvard education at this company I worked for many, many years. But from the funding standpoint and the spend, I was always able to, I was part of a guerrilla company where anything and everything that I did was, the money was never a topic in how the strategies were deployed because I worked with major companies that had multi-million-dollar banks per se, you know? Yeah. And so going into it, I was not prepared in that. But I've since, you learn as you go, and that's really the fun of it because from giving, you know, I took on a couple roles that I didn't mention that I was also, I was not mentoring, but I came in from a consulting perspective too, from the beverage industry. And the piece that I didn't throw in there is that as we're launching this project with wine, we also stayed alive a little bit. We were consulting with a couple different brands that were trying to get off the ground, just as we were doing, ironically. And, you know, I took on a large campaign for about 6 months with a very large project that's a celebrity as we speak. I'm not sure I want to mention the name at the moment, but if I did, you would be really taken by the project that we took on. But it was a vodka that a celebrity came to us, and we continued to give input consulting-wise for 6 months from a strategy standpoint, a route to market. And so that really developed and evolved for me also, and helped me with my own projects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you had a lot of the pieces of the puzzle, and the financial piece you thought you had, you didn't. And when you became more open to not being, like you said, making it about yourself and open to other ideas, and that's where you ended up taking off and being more successful. Can I fast forward to lessons learned? So you're doing what you want to do now. You still have these other ideas, and it sounds like you said, you got this first-class education working for this corporation and all these people over the years. What would you, now that you're where you want to be, you created what you wanted to create now, what would you have done? Do you regret not doing anything sooner? You know, would you have done this sooner? Was the timing perfect for you to leave when you left? Would you have done it sooner if you could go back? And, you know. Yeah.
Julie, I would have done it sooner, and I would have been, and unfortunately the same hiccups I would have hit, but I felt like I would have given more. You know, as we get older, I'm a person who feels like I'm at a certain age, and I left this company at a very, I feel, young age, in my mid 40s. But I feel like, as we do these ventures, they take time because there's a lot of evolving and a process and development. And I get anxious about how much time it takes to get something that you feel like is a tremendous idea and get it off the ground. So, yeah, I would have probably, if I've known what I know now, I would have left a little bit early. And I would have started earlier, because there's so much. The world is wide open for you out there. And if you have a passion, you can get on track with something that take the early education. And once you have it and the nuts and bolts of it, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, take it and run with it for yourself. Because being on your own, whether you make $1 today or 10 cents, being on your own, the enjoyment knowing that you have something that you've created, that there's a consumer out there for, whether you feel like that it's a home run or not, I've learned that less is more. And it's really the truest statement I can deliver out of being in corporate America for so many years and now doing what I do. It's really such a reward to be on my own and for myself.
That's awesome. It's so, well, I love that you would have done it a little bit sooner, but what I'm hearing you say is no matter how prepared you are, no matter when you do it, there's always pieces you don't know, but you should move forward anyways, because
right, that's true.
No matter how long you wait, you're never going to know every single thing you need to know to pursue your dream. So just starting, it's probably going to take a couple of turns anyway, so you might as well start not having all of your ducks in a row. And you can always but you can bring someone along that knows something you don't know and can offer you, like your friend did, a little bit of the guidance with the financial aspect that you were kind of holding off on.
Agreed. And I think that, we look around and we're conditioned and we're brought up to strive for the biggest and the best. And that's great. And I'm all for that. And we all want to be successful. But I think in the end, it's personally, for me speaking, you can get that reward, the self-reward, doing it for yourself. And if you can get any kind of experience, any trade, any industry, and let's say you can get 5 years in and you really feel like you've learned something in an industry, I really say get out and do your thing, and don't look at what people drive, and don't look at what people have for where they live and all the Instagram and social media. And that's great. That stuff helps promote business, but think about what's real and what's reality, and that's what you can deliver for yourself and what you can give each and every day. And that's really how I look at things now. And I know that there's one point in my life way back when I did not see the world that way. And I look back, and I'll be quick in saying this, I look back on my father, and my father was a very humble person, and I never understood it until I got older, because I really felt like that money and making it and doing and having the biggest job and the best title and was really what it was all about. But in fact, it's really not. It's what you can do for yourself, and it's simplified. Make it simple, because simple is big. It really is.
Simple is big. Ooh, I want to end on that. Thank you so much. It's a great way to end it, a great way to wrap it up, and it's a awesome lesson, and it's usually not well learned until we're a little bit older, but thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Julie, so much. It was a pleasure.